This week saw horror in our nation's capital. Connecticut's members of Congress were there, and we'll talk with two who were witnesses to this terrible chapter in our nation's history.
Senator Chris Murphy and 4th District Congressman Jim Himes. They'll recount what it was like to be in a building under siege and whether the crisis is over or beginning.
And Professor Jacob Hacker of Yale University gives us some perspective on this assault on democracy and our nation's choices moving forward.
It's all ahead Sunday, January 10th, 2021.
From Eyewitness News, this is Face the State, Connecticut's most watched local political program.
Good morning. I'm Kevin Rennie.
And I'm Doobie McDowell. What happened Wednesday in the U.S. Capitol has shaken the nation. And then there's our own president's role in it all. Joining us, Connecticut Senator Chris Murphy, who was in the Senate chamber when the rioters breached the building. Good morning, Senator Murphy, and hope you and your family are doing okay.
Good morning. Thanks for having me on.
I want to begin with a tweet you sent out Tuesday night. Get some sleep tonight, everyone, because the insurrectionists are still showing up tomorrow to try to overthrow our democracy, and we have to be ready to save our country and our Constitution. Suggests that we all should have known this was coming?
Well, I mean, I don't think you had to be on the dark web to understand what was potentially going to happen. It was clear that at least there were some in that crowd who had the intent to commit violence. And the minute you heard that the president was going to go down to the ellipse and urge them to march on the Capitol, you should have known that the logical consequence was going to be at least a handful of them trying to do something incredibly dumb. It turned out that there were 8,000 to 10,000 of them that ended up storming the building. And so there are a lot of people who have responsibility here. At the top of the list are those individuals who committed these crimes, Donald Trump, who incited them to march on the Capitol, and then those members of Congress who created an expectation amongst the crowd that they could actually successfully stop the inauguration of Joe Biden by storming that building. And then we'll, of course, have to ask why the Capitol was not properly defended. It shouldn't be that easy for people to be able to enter the building, and we'll have to answer some really tough questions in the coming days.
Senator, I know it's difficult to predict Donald Trump's behavior, but what do you think the chances are that he will issue a blanket pardon for these insurrectionists?
I think it's very possible that he will issue that pardon. I know he gave this video statement the other night that sort of, looked like a hostage video in which he, said that he respected the results of the election and would move forward on a transition. But then the very next morning, he said that he wouldn't be attending the inauguration, which was yet another signal to his unhinged supporters that the election was illegitimate and they should continue the fight. So we've always believed that there were a lot more pardons coming, potentially for himself and his family. But now you have to add to the list the possibility of these individuals. I mean, the job right now is to go get them. There should have been more arrests that day. Now we got to chase them around the country. Let's not assume that they're going to be pardoned. Let's go round them up, arrest them, and hold them to justice.
Have you received any explanation as to why they allow these people to just sort of walk out of the Capitol?
Yeah, I'm the top Democrat on the committee that funds the Capitol Police. So, that night at 11 o'clock, I was on the phone with the chief getting a briefing, and I asked that very question. Their answer was that they were so focused on clearing the Capitol so that we could get back to business that they couldn't, walk and chew gum at the same time. They couldn't clear the Capitol and make arrests. I don't know that I buy that explanation. In fact, the Capitol Police are pretty good at making mass arrests, as are Metropolitan Police. They do that pretty regularly in protest situations where people are occupying streets and buildings. This was an exceptional situation. I grant them that. But it just doesn't stand to reason that they could only arrest 14 people that day.
Senator, the House is expected to move to impeach President Trump next week. Your thoughts on that?
I mean, the last thing that I want to be doing in the final 2 weeks of this administration is impeaching a president. I guess I just really worry about what comes next. I worry that these people are not going to stop. They are going to come back either on Inauguration Day or beforehand, and the president is going to egg them on. And the one thing that has to happen in American democracy is the peaceful transition of power. And if this president is going to make that difficult or impossible, then we have an obligation to take steps to remove him from office. I don't know that that effort succeeds. I'm not sure that there are more than a handful of Republican votes for impeachment today, but I think they will watch his actions over the next 24 to 48 hours very carefully. And you may have other Republicans like Ben Sasse joining in openness to impeachment, depending on what the president does and says.
How then can he be reined in, for lack of a better phrase?
Well, I think right now, if we're not going to remove him from office, either through the 25th Amendment or impeachment, then we just have to have a massive security effort to assure that there is no way that anyone can disrupt the inauguration. That involves a level of unprecedented security for the campus. We need to move forward with the inauguration. It needs to be a public inauguration. Members of Congress need to be there. We need to show the world that these thugs and this president can't stop democracy from continuing. If we can't get rid of him, then at the very least, we need to assure that the chain of command is not going to follow any unconstitutional orders to stand in the way of that transition. I don't think they will. And then we need to beef up security.
Senator, you mentioned in your opening comments that there was members of Congress were also inciting the mob on Wednesday. Do you expect that any action will be taken against Senator Josh Hawley, who seems to be the focus of alarm at what he did?
Well, Josh Hawley was the first to declare he was going to make these objections, but it was followed by a dozen others. They all bear some responsibility here. I called them. I talked to them on the Senate floor in the days after they announced their intent to object. I told them how dangerous this would be and that it could potentially lead to the unraveling of American democracy. They knew what the stakes were here, and they proceeded. Hawley, I think, does bear some special attention because that night he could have chosen to stand down. He could have withdrawn his objection to Pennsylvania. And even after 4 people were killed in the takeover of the U.S. Capitol, he continued to incite those individuals. I don't know whether there's going to be action taken. I haven't fully contemplated that yet. I know there are calls for his resignation. I doubt he will leave. But clearly they need to change their behavior.
Senator Chris Murphy, sorry we have to end it here. So much more to talk to you about. Thank you very much for joining us.
Thanks a lot.
Another member of Connecticut's congressional delegation had some harrowing moments himself.
When we come back, Representative Jim Himes joins us.